Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4157. Today's date is July 17, 2026. It's been almost like a night at 10:31 p.m. All right, let's just jump into the question. Let's go. Okay, the question is what is the ultimate vision? Okay, first of all, what is at least this question and why am I asking this question to myself? Well, I wanted to I want to build a artificial intelligence, a such a intelligence or such a AI that could predict the future. I called it Adam. And yeah, so before I wanted to build this AI, I wanted to ask question. I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences if I build this thing. What will gonna happen? Things and that and that. Okay. So that's why I'm actually asking this question to myself. By the way, these questions are actually came from ChatGPT. Like I went to ChatGPT, I said that key I wanted to build such a AI that could predict the future, suggest me hundreds of possible consequences in question format. ChatGPT kind of like suggest me hundreds of questions. This is one of those questions. Now regarding about the question says that what is my ultimate vision? What is actually my vision for this thing? Like a reason, like a why are you kind of like a building a AI that could predict the future? First of all, is that na ki why am I trying to build such a AI that could predict the future? Like it's kind of like something sounds so fancy, but it is not. Okay, I don't know. Somehow I realized something that everything is actually happened by kind of like some certain pattern. I don't know. Maybe I am seeing this thing, or maybe I don't know. What came after Sunday? Monday. What came after Monday? Tuesday. What is the higher number of 3? 4. What is the lower number of 4? 3. I don't know. Okay. Like basically, okay, this is the number. When will I wake up tomorrow? 7 a.m. Now, like basically, how do you knew that? Because I already been wake up 7 a.m. for almost like a last 4 or 5 year, or maybe till the lifetime. I've been kind of like a wake up at 7 a.m. So higher possible chances that I will gonna wake up at tomorrow at 7 a.m. Okay. So basically is this thing, and it's not just a kind of like a me. I'm kind of like a finding a pattern. You also kind of like find the pattern too. Ask this question to yourself. When you will wake up tomorrow? The possible answer would be you already knew when you will wake up tomorrow. Okay. Obviously your life is also kind of like a went through a kind of like a some sort of amount of pattern or things and that and that. If you're doing a job, then everything is kind of like a settle. Like a 9 to 5 job, you have to kind of like a wake up at 7 a.m, do the breakfast and things and that. You get a kind of like a cab at maybe 8 p.m, sorry, 8 a.m, arrive at the office at almost like a 8:30 or maybe 8:45 a.m, punch the card, log in. Yeah. So basically, yeah, like this is what it is. Like it's not kind of like a things that we cannot able to predict the future. We could predict the future, but understand the context. Okay, yeah. If I'm gonna say predict the future means it's not kind of like somebody a fortune teller who kind of like a telling the future and things and that. No, I'm kind of like a saying this thing is a kind of like a what is actually the possible consequences, and how do we supposed to be kind of like a making sure how do I supposed to predict what will gonna happen next. Okay, with a kind of like understanding pattern and things and that. Now, whatever the kind of like a scenario that I told you, it was a kind of like a very common scenario. What about kind of like let's talk about institutional level, or what's about the kind of like some government level? Okay, now let me kind of like explain something. Every innovation actually come through need, necessity. Okay, yeah, like when we need something, we innovate stuff, right? But for this particular purpose, if you wanted to understand, like basically need is a mother of innovation, right? Like everyone says this thing, everyone exactly right. Yeah, but the problem is that no one try to understand this context, no one try to understand what exactly need and where do we supposed to be kind of like a something figure it out need means what. Okay, okay, I don't know, it's a very hard to describe. I'm gonna kind of like explain in simple language. Okay, so let me tell you one thing. Couple of days ago, like basically, right now my home is in under construction. My father is kind of like a built up building a kind of like a couple of rooms attached with a kind of like a like yeah for the renting and things and that and that. So my father is actually building a kind of like a something a room. Okay, so basically is this thing, the material is kind of like a downstairs. Okay, like a building material, like a bricks and the reti and gitti. These are material, by the way. Reti gitti means reti. I'm not really sure about the English word for that. Bricks means the bricks. Reti and gitti, you just Google it. Okay, those are the building material. Okay, now the material is at the downstairs. Okay, so how do we supposed to be transport those material from downstairs to kind of like a two-story building? How do we supposed to do that? By simple is that key at the top floor, someone has to be kind of like a somebody stay at the top floor, put the kind of like a rope, attach a bucket into it, and kind of like somebody pull that bucket. Okay, it's a kind of like a very easy, very convenient, right? Like then why not those kind of like a people who are kind of like a doing this thing? Why does those people are kind of like a something holding a kind of like a somebody reti gitti on their bucket on their head and kind of like a travel from bottom to kind of like a staircase and things and that and do this top floor? Like basically attach a bucket with rope, it might be so much convenient, so much easier, so much faster. Okay, like like wha- like what might kind of like a wrong thing will gonna happen? You just need to attach a bucket in such a way that material will not spill out, right? So this is the exactly you have to do. So it's a very simple kind of like a something the solution for it. Then why not those people are doing it? What exactly is this thing? Then my answer would be that ki those people are kind of like somebody just a construction people who didn't really get into the education and things and that, so that's why they didn't really knew it. But that is not the answer. Okay, like basically is this thing, the smartness is never really came from the education, and definitely not, and I am also not a kind of like a somebody smart person too. Okay, but then why does those people are a kind of like a, why not those people are kind of like attach the bucket and kind of like somebody attach the bucket with the rope and kind of like somebody pull the material from bottom to top? Why not they do that thing? Why just kind of like they manually grinding all those material through? Yeah, why are they doing that thing? Because of the SOP. Okay, what is actually system, what is actually SOP? SOP means system of process. I'm not really sure about this thing. Okay, let me explain with even more example what is actually SOP, then I will try to explain to you. So have you been to McDonald's? If you went to McDonald's, the taste of burger or whatever it is, it tastes exactly the same the way that you eat the McDonald's at somewhere else. Yeah, like go to the any McDonald's outlet, okay, eat the burger, okay, and go far away kind of like outlet which is available over the McDonald's outlet and eat the burger over there. You realize that the taste is exactly the same. There is no change at all. How this actually happening? Okay, yeah, this is not the packaged food. This is kind of like a legit person who kind of like a make this burger. So how there is no kind of like a taste change? everything is kind of like exactly as it is. Why? Because those people who are making the burger, those are not making the burger, those are kind of like a following the SOP means like that, system of process, or maybe systematic process of things, and that. What exactly happened that ki the person who kind of like invented the burger in the McDonald's or things, and that, he wants to kind of like simply make sure that the taste of the burger should supposed to be taste equally in every outlet. So what does he do? He kind of like somebody create a SOP regarding about, like, basically he cannot able to be go every outlet and kind of like make the burger. So he create the SOP. So what is actually SOP? In that SOP, it kind of like a written, put the kind of like a two bread, add this particular this, like add 2 cups or maybe 2 spoon of this, 2 spoon of that, 2 spoon of that, not too much, not too less. Okay, use the standard spoon, not kind of like a extra another spoon and things, and that wrap like that way and that way and that way, like everything is kind of like a properly mentioned. The person who is just following the SOP, that's it. And that's why the kind of like a simply the taste is a kind of like a look very similar. Now, which is right? Yeah, which is right. So the problem is that na ki most of the people are actually following the SOP. Now I'm trying to focusing on the SOP means what? A kind of like a structure of process, or maybe system of process, or whatever the name that you wanted to mention. Okay, yeah. And everyone follows that thing. No one wants to break that thing. Even if it kind of like hurt them, they don't want to break that thing. Why? Why not people are kind of like breaking the SOP? Because of that, it consider as a wrong. Okay, what do you mean? Okay, let me tell you one thing. A particular person can make the burger much more much more tasty than SOP. He realized that if I add a kind of like a somebody 2 spoon of maybe something that could kind of like add the kind of like a flavor more in a burger, so that particular person cannot able to do this thing. Why? Because if he could do this thing, he break the SOP. When he break the SOP, might be the burger sound tastes really good, but he might gonna lose the job. Yeah, he might gonna lose the job by doing something better. Now, what exactly is this thing? Like, does kind of like somebody the people are not making things better? Well, that is a problem. The problem is that ki when we are in structure, or maybe in when we are means human, are kind of like doing a work in a structure format, then we do not have freedom to do anything at all. We just follow the order, we just follow the SOP, we just follow the structure. Okay, have you ever experienced, if you are kind of like doing a job, you are allowed to do something with a structure way that you possible. If you wanted to kind of like file the complaint, then you have a structure that you have to go there, go to the police station, do this, do that, do that. You do not kind of like go directly in that and that. Okay, yeah. And that is kind of like a really good, because SOP and structure is a very much essential to kind of like follow the structure, because when we have kind of like a complete structure, then we could kind of like understand, and we could kind of like actually solve the problem instead of creating chaos. Because if we do not have structure, or if we do not have kind of like a SOP, the chaos will gonna happen, because every person is kind of like doing something very differently. Okay, so do you understand what exactly happened? Everyone follow the structure, everyone follow the SOP. Now, because of this thing actually happened, people are not thinking differently. People are usually think in kind of like something just a structure point of perspective. They only think that I have a job to do this, that's it, I will not gonna do more. Why? Because if I do this thing, I might gonna lose the job, or maybe something happened. And basically people are kind of like really scared of kind of like somebody do something differently. They just wanted to kind of like a part of the community, because this is the human nature. Okay, yeah, we always wanted to part of belonging something, not to do something. No one wants to be heroic, like literally. Yeah, what I'm saying is that ki does people want to become hero? No, Like basically they are kind of like admiring hero and the television or movies or things and that. But when the kind of like some nature or universe are kind of like giving them chance to become a hero, they will not try to become hero. Yeah, they will not try to become, they just lose, they don't want to do this thing. Because when you want to become a hero, or when you want to kind of like sort of detach the SOP and try to do something much more better, it really required a courage. Okay, and what is exactly that courage? Courage of kind of like a doing something different than ordinary, or kind of like a things and that. Okay, and there might be a kind of like a in so many consequences too. Okay, so basically is this thing in 2026. Okay, in 20 right now in 2026 we have freedom. Okay, like basically I don't really see any country who is a kind of like a simply a colony or anything. No, nothing like at all. Every person has to be freedom. Every person have kind of like everything what they should supposed to be do, right? But actually not. Every person is actually stuck at that structure. Okay, now like basically is this thing that structure is not kind of like a somebody the taking your rights and things and that. No, but that structure is a kind of like a somebody letting you to not to think more, or letting you to not to think differently, or letting you to not to think kind of like a somebody outside the box. Okay, I'm telling you from average point of perspective, it's not kind of like a every profession kind of like that. Maybe a kind of like a such a profession are really required to think outside the box, like a creative professionals and things and that. Or maybe kind of like a something whatever, they are kind of like a somebody how think to do something very differently. But the almost like a 90% of the people, or 80 to 70% of the people are kind of like somebody stuck at that structure. Okay, yeah, in military, in kind of like a professionalism, in corporate, in job, in everything, they are kind of like a stuck at this thing. And because of they are kind of like a stuck at this thing, they cannot think kind of like a outside the box and things and that. Okay, sometimes I just kind of like a talk about something, I just kind of like a talk about something way away from the point and things and that, whatever. Okay, the you understand my point. My point is I'm trying to tell you is that because of we are kind of like a following the structure, from that structure most of the people are do not think from outside the box and things and that. Okay, yeah. Now what will gonna happen if the people don't really think from outside the box? What will gonna happen? Now basically is this thing, now till now you understand this thing. Now let's understand the ecosystem. Okay, yeah, what is actually ecosystem? A ecosystem, or maybe kind of like a something, let's just say a kind of like a something, is this thing, whatever the society run according to the kind of like a something thought process of people. Okay, now let me kind of like explain something. Okay, I am 31. Sorry, I'm 33 by the way. Okay, I'm 33. So this kind of like a intelligence, you only get when you cross 30. Okay, the stuff that I would gonna mention, uh, you will not gonna understand this thing unless you understand, unless you cross 30. Okay, because when you cross 30, you can see the life very differently. Okay, so should we start? Okay, let's start. Okay, so basically is this thing, have you ever, okay, the people, for the people who are cross 30, have you ever kind of like realized something that key people are change according to the time? Have you ever kind of like experienced that thing? Well, let me kind of like explain you something. Okay, so I'm kind of like telling you from simple point of perspective. Okay, not too much. One of my friend name, I will not gonna mention, XYZ. Okay, yeah, he's a person, his music is really good, like really great. Like basically I knew that particular person since we were kind of like a kids. Okay, and his music taste is kind of like a so good, like a so good, like literally I really admire that what kind of like a song he listen. And when he kind of like somebody share me the kind of like somebody song, or kind of like a letting me listen, I was like, oh my god, what is exactly song? Like he kind of like a find a song, a remix, whatever it is, in such a way that it kind of like really good. Like I don't know, but his music taste is really amazing. Like really amazing. It just resonate with me a lot. Like really resonate. Like whatever he kind of like listen, I just that song is became my favorite. Okay, his song style is a kind of like a somewhat something EDM, somewhat something kind of like a something that key EDM with a kind of like a somebody Hollywood music with the Bollywood music, with kind of like a things that key. I don't know how I'm supposed to explain, but it's really good. It's really good. Okay, I have my entire kind of like a music collection because of him, and I still listen those songs because of it was really good and really great. Okay, now basically is this thing, now we are old. Okay, he's married, he have a kids and things and that. Okay, and basically is this thing that a couple of year ago I kind of like met him, and we are kind of like went to the trekking and things and that. Okay, now basically he started playing a song. Okay, and the way that he played the song, like sorry, the song that he kind of like started playing, that song, it just completely changed. Like basically he was listening a Bhojpuri song or Bihari song or whatever it is. Like I am not kind of like a simply the discriminate the kind of like a Bihari Bhojpuri song. No, definitely not. But his mind is literally shifted. I don't know. I'm not kind of like experienced that thing. I also experienced multiple times when he kind of like driving a car, he played the kind of like a song, and such a song that just not right. Like I don't know how to supposed to explain this thing, because I was really admire of his song choices. The way that he played the song is like a my god, like a literally great. Now I just feel like that. What exactly happened with you, dude? Like what exactly is this his song? Okay, and this is not just a one thing. Another thing too. Okay, um, I don't know how to supposed to explain this thing. Okay, what I realized that he regarding about like let's talk about the kind of like assembly consumption of content. Okay, because this might be kind of like assembly much more better way to understand things. Okay, so this particular person is a particular person who really love Hollywood movies. Because of him, I am kind of like a somebody love Hollywood movies. Okay, because why? Like basically is this thing that he has a kind of like a computer, and at that time I don't really have a computer. He has that computer, and he is kind of like a somebody the downloading movies and things and Hollywood movies and that and that. Like basically is this thing, the I have a kind of like a crazy regarding about crazy thing, like a crazy like about the Hollywood movies because of that particular person. Okay, and not only just like that, nah, like I am not kind of like a comparing which is kind of like a better, which is not better and things and that. But what I realized something. Okay, he is the guy. He is a kind of like a somebody the consuming such a piece of content that really loves, like it kind of like a feel like professional, feel like kind of like somebody really good, really great, like a my god. Okay, like I don't know. Okay, he is a kind of like a particular person who kind of like a find a song by Shazam. Okay, what's the Shazam, by the way? Shazam is a kind of like an application that you kind of like detect the song. Okay, because some of the song doesn't really have any names or things and that, or maybe kind of like some of the songs are kind of like in the background. So he just wanted to know what is actually that song. See, he used kind of like a Shazam to kind of like detect the song, and from that song he wrote that song, and then he went to the YouTube and download the song. And this is actually happened in maybe 2007, 2007 or 8, maybe something like that. No, 2010, sorry, 2009 or 10, maybe something like that. Okay, in that time. And no, not really, I'm not really sure about the exact timeline, but probably this actually happened is because of in 2010 to 2015, in between, something like that. Okay, so so he is kind of like used to, like I really admire the way that he kind of like consuming content, the way that he thinks and that and that and that. Like it felt really good. Right now his choices are completely changed. He's watching kind of like a news, which is not wrong by the way, but a kind of like a somebody, he's watching a kind of like a such a piece of content that I don't know how do I supposed to explain this thing. It's a very like a very wrong. Okay, yeah. Not because of the choices, like it because of choices. I'm not really sure how do I supposed to. It's not wrong by the way, like definitely not. But I seen a kind of like a changes inside of him, the way that he speak, the way that he talk, the way that he consume the content, the way that he kind of like somebody, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm kind of like a judging too much, I'm not really sure, but I realized something. And not just kind of like that particular person, so many people are changed. And I realized something about life. Change is a part of the process. It's a relative. We are not stagnant. We are not kind of like a fix. Our thoughts are kind of like a change all the time. Okay, same thing goes with me. Like if I, even if I'm kind of like a started kind of like a somebody listening my old artifact, I might kind of like ask myself, dude, what the fuck I was kind of like a thinking. But I realized that it's not just him, it's me too. Because of that na, I also change too. Change is a kind of like a part of the process. It's a relative and things and that and that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing. I'm trying to tell you about the ecosystem. Okay, yeah. So ecosystem is that ki usually is this thing that ki it's a very hard to kind of like a somewhat something explain, but uh okay, yeah, like what exactly is this thing? um it's okay, let me explain in simple language. Okay, yeah. Now whoever you are, okay, yeah, you are from where you are from, okay, yeah, your surrounding is actually influence you. Like whatever the kind of like a surrounding that you are grown up, it influence you, it influence your thought process, it influence you to how to live the life, it influence you to how to kind of like a think, it influence you to how to be kind of like a behave and everything and that and that and that. Okay, example, let's just say that key, in India, I grown up in India, I born in India, I usually come from a kind of like a Maharashtra, central part of India. Okay, so basically in here, things are kind of like a something very much common for me because I grew up here. I don't really see any kind of like a abnormal. Okay, now what is actually abnormal? Let me explain. Okay, I watch a kind of like a somebody YouTube video regarding about a kind of like a somebody Japan, something like a Japan infrastructure, or maybe Japan kind of like a normal life, a common life over there. Okay, so Japan is a country, they have kind of like a very smooth road, electricity, Wi-Fi, internet. I don't know. The basic thing is very much different. It's not really better than my country. Like, it is better than my country, but it is different. Okay, do you understand? It's a different. Okay. Um, this is a kind of like a thought, or this is a kind of like a thing you only experience when you actually experience that thing. You actually travel to some location, then you realize something that okay, this is a kind of like a somewhat something a different place. Okay, so this is like basically when you travel, you kind of like realize something. It's a kind of like a somewhat something a different space or different place. Okay, if I went to Europe, I might kind of like look something very differently. Like why does people are kind of like a something like look so different, think so different? Like I don't know. Um, um there is a kind of like a couple of people who kind of like a mention, I was kind of like watch YouTube videos, and in that video the people who are kind of like a mention, who are kind of like a living in Europe, specifically in kind of like a Germany. Okay, the people who are there, like old people, okay, they are very like very passionate about life. Okay, let me kind of like explain. In India, when you cross 60, usually people are kind of like a stay at home. They not do anything at all. They are not do any kind of like a crazy shit. Nothing really at all. Obviously, you will not gonna find any kind of like a particular 60-year-old person who is kind of like doing a kind of like a something the dancing or maybe yoga or maybe gymming or things. Maybe it's very like a very not, you might not gonna seen in here specifically in Indian context point of perspective. You might not see the 60-year-old or maybe 70-year-old kind of like a person who's kind of like a driving a bicycle. You might not seen over here. Maybe rare case you might gonna seen, but very less. Okay, but if you went to Europe, the people are so crazy. Like basically, the guy who kind of like went to the Europe, that particular person says that he saw a kind of like so many old people cross almost like a 75 age. They are bicycling with joy, with, I don't know how they're supposed to explain. They are kind of like a living the life. And the way that they are kind of like a driving a bicycle was like, oh my god, literally they feel like that they are they athletes or what? Okay, yeah. Like basically this thing, I'm not saying that those people are good and we are not wrong or we are stupid. No, it's not. It's a kind of like a society, kind of like an influence how they should supposed to be live their life, because of Europe is kind of like a already developed countries and things and that they kind of like look at the life very differently. But in India, things are very differently, because as I mentioned, the thought process and surrounding are kind of like influence our thought process. Same thing goes over here, because most of the people who are kind of like across 70, they do not kind of like do all those shit. They just kind of like stay at home and be grumpy all the time. Okay, and it's very common over here too. But in US or maybe in Europe, things are not. Same scenario that you kind of like experience this thing in different part of world and stuff like that. Okay. So that is called kind of like a simply ecosystem or ecology or whatever you wanted to mention. Okay. Now, basically it's this thing. I was kind of like basically vision, like where is kind of like a vision actually came from, like where is kind of like a things are actually came from, like when this kind of like a thought came inside of me that I should supposed to build a kind of like a simply AI that could predict the future. When this thought actually came from. Okay, so I kind of like explain everything. Okay, now I kind of like try to understand a little bit of consequences, scenario, and things and that. Okay, couple of year ago, also I'm belong to the Maharashtra. So basically, the politician are over here are do something very crazy shit. Okay, what's the crazy shit? Okay, so basically the politician are kind of like a try to kind of like a gain the vote by kind of like a providing lot of good stuff to the people. Now what is exactly good stuff means what? Now usually what we supposed to be expect that a politician should supposed to be kind of like a build the road, kind of like simply clean up the area and things and that to kind of like a simply, right, yeah. But in here politicians are kind of like doing something very crazy. There is a one politician, I will not going to mention the name. The one politician is kind of like assembly providing free money, directly money on their bank account. Women's, okay, specifically he target as a kind of like a woman, as a kind of like somebody is this thing. He's a kind of like a politician. He kind of like says this thing. Every month, the women in our state will kind of like get free money on their bank account. 3,000 rupees, 3,000 something rupees in the bank account. Now, is it a right choice? Definitely not. Then why does kind of like do this thing? Because of the vote bank, because of the kind of like a politics and things and that. Because if that particular neta who kind of like a particular politician who kind of like doing this thing, giving the free money to the kind of like a citizen or kind of like a woman and things and that, then women kind of like a vote to him and things, because that particular person buying the citizen vote by kind of like a giving them direct money. So basically he's kind of like a getting the advantage of kind of like a giving the money. But what consequences happen? Does he knew that thing? Let me explain what exactly happened. If you give money free, like if you kind of like a giving money freely to the people without putting in any effort and things and that, they will become more poor. What do you mean by that? Okay, let me kind of like tell you. If you are not putting effort to earn money, then you are became poor. Like basically, okay, let me tell you one thing. You put the effort, you get the money. Example, you do your job, you get the end of the salary. Okay. So what exactly that makes you? You are growing. That means you are kind of like a became rich person, or maybe kind of like a became better person. Okay, yeah. Because in returns of money, you are kind of like a kind of like a increase the opportunity of grow inside of you. You are kind of like a thinking much more better and things and that whatever the job that you are doing. Okay, yeah. But what if someone kind of like give you directly money? What will gonna happen? You will not gonna put any kind of like effort. Okay, yeah. When you are not putting any kind of like effort, you will not kind of like earn any kind of like a skills and talent and things and that. So when you are not getting any skills and talent and nothing really at all, and you are kind of like getting free money in your bank account automatically, why do you need to put effort? And when that particular person will not gonna put effort, where that money will he will spend? He will kind of like spend that money on something that he will kind of like get the dopamine, fast dopamine, like consumption of alcohol or maybe whatever it is. Okay. So let me tell you one thing. What exactly happened? This is kind of like a legit scenario. What exactly happened, by the way? Since the politician who kind of like announced that particular policy, okay, the women in specifically in my state are kind of like doing a kind of like a day job and things and that, but they are quit that day job. Why? Because they are kind of like getting money on their bank account every single month. Why they will kind of like do the job? They will kind of like say, no, we will not gonna do the job. Like why do we supposed to do the job? Like basically the government is actually kind of like giving us free money and things and that. So what will gonna happen? Because of this kind of like announcement and things and that, the day worker wages are increased because there is less people. Okay, yeah. And because of this thing, chaos happened. Okay. So basically, do you understand? The politician who are kind of like getting vote bank, but kind of like instead of kind of like collapsing the people thought process, things, and kind of like a lot of stuff. Okay, yeah. Now basically is this thing. Does that politician knew that thing that would gonna happen? No. Then why? Then basically is this thing like why does he do that thing? Like why that politician kind of like did that thing? Because he didn't really knew that thing. He didn't really know what will gonna happen. That is a kind of like a problem. Like basically is this thing. Our mind think that key whatever the kind of like a stuff that we might gonna do that add kind of like a value in the society, but in return it does not. Like basically that politician kind of like said this thing that because I'm kind of like giving them free money, so that money people will kind of like utilize for kind of like some rent or maybe their essential purposes or grocery or things and that. But in return, those people are kind of like spending that amount of money for doing something stupid shit like consuming alcohol or whatnot. By the way, I'm not kind of like precisely right about this particular stuff. Why? Because of that, I'm talking about the average point of perspective. Okay. So basically, people doesn't know that what will gonna happen. Okay, the politician who doesn't really knew what will gonna happen. Okay. This is not just kind of like a one scenario. There are so many scenario is actually happened in my country. Okay, couple of years ago, demonetization actually happened. What's the demonetization? I kind of like clearly knew that thing. In 2017 or maybe 18, it was 16 or 17. I'm not really sure about that particular stuff. Okay, maybe 2016 or maybe 17. I'm not really sure about this particular, but in that particular time. Okay. Oh. Oh. Okay. So what is actually happened in that particular time? So the government specifically kind of like decided that they are kind of like simply block the note currency. Like basically in my country, the higher note are kind of like 1,000 rupees and 500 rupees. Okay, yeah. So basically, the government kind of like says this thing that ki 500 note and 1000 rupees note are banned. Like it will not consider as a legal tender. Okay, you will not gonna do transaction. Okay, so basically, when that announcement actually happened, at the time I was kind of like doing a job, and at that time, kind of like somebody I realized that he like I need to kind of like fill the petrol. I have 500 rupees. Okay, so what do I supposed to do? Like basically, this is kind of like some stuff. Okay, and basically I didn't knew that thing. Like basically, it's this thing that someone kind of like called me, say this thing, dude. The money that you have, like how much money that you have, like basically the cash money that you have. I said I have almost like a maybe kind of like a 2000 rupees in my bank account, and I have almost like a 500 rupees in my cash. He says spend that money, like a go to the petrol pump and kind of like a fuel the, like put the petrol in your bike. Like why? Like just put it, like basically tomorrow you will not gonna spend that 500 rupees of money. Like what the fuck is actually happened? Like basically, yeah, that is true. Okay, so I just kind of like think that it was kind of like a bluffing. Yeah, just fuck off. Like a, what the fuck? Because at that time, na, I don't really have like a I have that, like basically I was kind of like a living with like I was at the Khapar Kheda. Okay, what's a Khapar Kheda? Khapar Kheda is a place where kind of like simply the, like I was kind of like doing a job over there, and there is no television at all. Okay, yeah, there is a television, but the television was actually broken and things and that. So, and I just have a kind of like a mobile phone, and usually in the mobile phone, I just kind of like access YouTube, watch kind of like a bunch of funny videos and things and that. Why do I supposed to watch this announcement and stuff like that? I didn't really watch it. I just completely ignore it. I just fuck off, dude. Okay, yeah. Then next day what will gonna happen, that key I have to be kind of like a, I have to kind of like a come home. Okay, so I have kind of like almost like a 600 rupees. Okay, 500 plus kind of like 100 rupees. So I kind of like took the bus. Okay, the bus says that key, do you have money? Yeah, obviously. Yeah, no, they will say we will not gonna accept 500 rupees, we will not gonna accept 1000 or 500 rupees. Like what the fuck, I have kind of like it's only 500 rupees. He says no, we will not gonna kind of like accept the 500 rupees. Like what the fuck is this thing, dude? Okay, yeah, and like because of this thing actually happened, like what the fuck is that? That is very stupid. Okay, yeah, somehow I kind of like arranged the some sort of kind of like assembly money, and kind of like assembly came home. Okay, and when I came home, the says that ki whatever the money that you have, like a 500 rupees or 100 rupees, you can kind of like a deposit on the bank. Okay, yeah, you will not gonna kind of like somebody spend in over here, but you can kind of like a deposit on the bank. So I did not wait. I kind of like went to the bank. Okay, and kind of like a deposit my 500 rupees, and that my 500 rupees are actually deposit in my bank account. Okay, yeah, and they kind of like mention that this particular period of time, and after that bank will also not gonna accept this amount of mine, so this amount of money. So before the time I kind of like deposit my money. Now the chaos is not actually happened, chaos happened after that. Okay, now what exactly happened after that, ki I don't have kind of like a money. Okay, now at that time, phone pay and internet banking was kind of like a very new. Okay, I don't really have that much thing. So basically, most of my transaction actually happened through cash. Okay, now I and basically at that time they say you can withdraw only 2000 rupees. Like basically 2000 is a kind of like a new note, new kind of like a currency is actually kind of like distributed by the government, RBI, and this is a kind of like a simply currency that you can use. 100 rupees you cannot able to be dispensed from the kind of like ATM and things and that. So you need to have 2000 rupees on your bank, and you can kind of like a withdraw 2000 rupees of note. That's it. Okay, yeah, not too much, not too less. No, only 2000 rupees. Now the problem is kind of like the problem is not gonna start, like a problem is actually happened that key 2000 rupees of note, it's a very big note. Okay, yeah, somehow I withdraw 2000 rupees of note. Okay, I went to the kind of like ATM. Oh my god, the people who are kind of like standing in the line, fuck. Okay, yeah, and everyone kind of like say no one kind of like get 100 rupees of note, everyone are kind of like getting 2000 rupees of note. like basically I was thinking that ki chalo kuch na kuch to mil jayega, like a whatever the kind of like a something I will kind of like a have instead of nothing. So yeah, so I kind of like a stay in that line for almost like hours, and then after that I kind of like a withdraw 2000 rupees of note. Now I have 2000 rupees of note. Okay, yeah. Now at that time I usually kind of like a went to the mess and kind of like a for the food. Okay, so I went to the mess. Okay, and I ate my food and I give them 2000 rupees, and then mess wala say वो मैं पैसे लूंगा ही नहीं, ये 200 रुपये 2000 रुपये. He was kind of, I will not gonna accept 2000 rupees. Like मेरे पास चिल्लर ही नहीं. He was like basically this thing. The mess thali was almost like a 60 rupees. Now how much money he has to be returned? He has to return me 1940 rupees because 60 rupees of late. Okay, and he says I don't really have 1900 something. I don't really have it. Obviously he doesn't really have it because everyone are kind of like giving him 2000 rupees of money. Like what the fuck is this thing, dude? Okay, yeah, like sir, I don't really have any kind of like money. I have just 2000 rupees of note. What do I fuck, what do I should supposed to do? Okay, yeah, no, like basically like he says that okay, you are the kind of like a customer, you kind of like came every single day, so basically we will kind of like a somebody 60 rupees, we like you kind of like a pay us money later. Okay, we kind of like a write down the 60 rupees right now. Okay, but tomorrow you have to give the money. Like sir, how do I supposed to give the tomorrow? Because tomorrow I will not gonna have another money. I have 2000 rupees of note. I have to kind of like a figure it out. And that's the kind of like a things I am kind of like a somebody searching for everywhere to kind of like a keep the change, like a like whenever I kind of like a get the change and things and that, getting almost like 100 rupees of note and things like that. Like basically I try so many things. Everyone say we don't really have change, we don't really have change, we don't. Instead of if I wanted to buy something, they will rejectly say no. Like literally I went to kind of like a, somebody such a store, a kind of like a bag, because I wanted to, like it's not really I don't want to bag, but because of I don't really have any kind of like a money, because I have kind of like a 2000 rupees of note. So I kind of like went there. This is the bag that I like, which cost me almost like a 400 rupees. Okay, I kind of like give them 2000 rupees of note. He says no, like he said no, we will not gonna kind of like give the bag. We will like basically we don't really have money, we cannot able to give you change. What the fuck is this thing? Like literally I have money, but I cannot able to spend that much amount of money. Okay, literally. Okay, somehow I kind of like found a kind of like a bus driver or bus conductor, and he kind of like give me change. Finally I feel like that finally I have kind of like a change of 2000 rupees, and somehow I kind of like survive that rest of the month by that change. Okay, because yeah, like this is kind of like a thing. So what I realized something, that every action comes with the consequences. Even if the good action, it comes with the consequences. Everything comes with the consequences. Like a, even if you kind of like a try to put something nice thing, that also comes with the consequences. Consequences is right and wrong too. Specifically, at the beginning, it will consider as a wrong. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Why does kind of like a demonetization actually happen? So demonetization actually happened is because of that India was actually suffering from kind of like a lot of fake currency. Okay, and basically it is very not possible to kind of like a things and that. So government kind of like decided that instead of kind of like somebody finding the fake currency and things and that, we just kind of like ban the old currency and kind of like establish new and things and that. So that is a kind of like a very noble kind of like a thought process, but the execution was completely wrong. Okay, yeah. And then I realized that what if I could kind of like made such a system that could kind of like predict the possible consequences, like a simulation. Like what if we could kind of like somebody the like before we implement in real world, what if we could kind of like implement same thing in simulation progress, in program, in kind of like a particular computer software, so that we would understand what might be possible consequences will gonna happen. Okay, yeah, and there are multiple consequences will gonna happen. Like basically, before we implement this thing in real world, let's just figure it out. Let's implement that thing in kind of like some simulation, because in the simulation the stakes are not really that much. What might gonna lose? just little bit of computing power, that's it. Okay, yeah, which is kind of like a far better than kind of like a consequences happen in real world. So basically what I realized that, okay, what if we could kind of like a run the kind of like a simulation on the system in a computer, so that we would aware of that what might gonna possible consequences happen, and from that consequences we learn, and we try not to do this thing, we try to kind of like simply figure it out, or kind of like a change something. Like basically realize that key, if we know that key we will gonna take this path, we will kind of like a we will kind of like arrive at kind of like a school far much more late, or maybe 40 minutes late. So we will not gonna took this path, we will gonna took another path, right? So basically is this thing, try to fixing a mistake before it mistake. Okay, so this is what I realized that, and that's why since I realized that key is like a simulation process is kind of like a much more better. Okay, where is that simulation actually came from? Okay, now simulation, this kind of like a process, it's not really that key I kind of like a demonetization actually happened and kind of like a I get this idea. No, simulation is a kind of like a process. Okay, let me tell you one thing. I was a CAD engineer. CAD engineer means like computer aided design modeler. Okay, I was kind of like a did a job for almost like a 2 year in a company. Okay, now basically there are couple of people in my company, they are kind of like doing the simulation. I'm not really sure that word simulation, whatever it is. Okay, but they kind of like calculate the stress and strain and things and that. What exactly their job is that key, they, okay, I see in a kind of like a particular person who kind of like made a universal coupling. Okay, if you don't know the universal coupling, a universal coupling who's kind of like a attached with the kind of like a differential with the axle rod and things and that. Okay, it's a mechanical component. So this is the universal coupling. Okay, and that universal coupling have a job that rotate and transport the motion from axle to differential. Okay, so because of this, it kind of like went through so much amount of stress and things and that. So basically the particular person, the person who's kind of like doing a simulation, he was kind of like assembly build a kind of like assembly universal coupling by kind of like a 3D model. Okay, now what he does, he kind of like assembly add a kind of like a material properties and things and that, and try to apply the kind of like a stress in the simulation, and he run the simulation that if that universal coupling is kind of like a bearing how much amount of stress and things and that, where the stress will gonna come, how do we supposed to be kind of like a making sure that key stress will kind of like a reduce, what kind of like a material property and alloy or any kind of like a material should be supposed to be used, or what, or things and that. Basically that particular person is a kind of like a somebody changing the material, changing the shape, changing this, changing that. And it's not kind of like a thing that he could able to do this thing. There is a lot of kind of like a debate actually happened in the back end that should we supposed to be change the material, or should we supposed to change this or that. And from that scenario, he kind of like make such a universal coupling which is kind of like a handle this much amount of stress with kind of like this much amount of properties and things and that. And he called it a kind of like a simulation, kind of like making sure that product is a kind of like a much more better understand how much he has a stress and where that stress came from, how much the kind of like a credibility of that particular coupling and things and that. And then I realized that, dude, if this software can simulate the kind of like a material or kind of like a mechanical equipment in a kind of like a making sure that how much stress is get and things and that, it's a kind of like a simulation. Nah? He's kind of like a simulating, try to do the simulation, make a mistake, fixing the mistake, do again, making mistake, fixing again, things and that. Okay, yeah. Why not we kind of like do this thing in real life? Not real life, but kind of like a real scenario with a kind of like a simulation process. And since then, I decided, it's not really decided, but like there are so many kind of like thoughts inside of me and that. And when I was kind of like thinking that key artifact, and from that artifact is also kind of like some things that key which like artifact is a kind of like basically is a social media content. Like I will kind of make the artifact where people will kind of share their thoughts and things and that. So in that situation, how do I supposed to be control the bad artifact? How do I supposed to be control the chaos and things and that? I need a kind of like a particular system that could kind of like understand the what is actually bad and things, what is actually wrong and things and that. And I cannot able to be determine that thing. I need a kind of like a simulation process. And since then, I kind of like think that Adam would be a kind of like option that could kind of like not only predict, it could predict the possibility because of the simulation, because it went through kind of like a so many simulations and things and that and that. The vision of Adam is the AI that could predict the future. The vision of this Adam is to add value to the kind of like a humanity, to kind of like a something existing, to making sure that we should supposed to be make mistake before we make mistake. Okay, like this is kind of like a process, and that's why this is the vision. And it's not just kind of like add value in me, my society, or my people. It add value to the humanity, because if I build such a system that could simulate the scenario, we could kind of like make the world much more better place, because we might gonna do mistake less. Okay, but there is also another thing. If we kind of like make mistake less, then how do we supposed to be grow? Okay, yeah. Or maybe kind of like only some certain people who kind of like grow because of their kind of like experiencing mistake in the simulation program. In the real world, people will not gonna think, right? So that is also another thing, because of the mistake is also really essential for growth, right? So yeah, there is so many stuff. Okay, but this is the kind of like a vision of Adam. Okay, to kind of like somebody try to kind of like making sure life or things make it much more better and things and that and that. By the way, this is just my vision. By the way, I haven't really make the Adam, and there are so many possible consequences. It's not really that I just kind of like make it and I didn't make. No, there are so many things are kind of like a matter. I'm just kind of like these are just my empty words. Okay, yeah, because when I will kind of like implement or execute, there are so much possible consequences will gonna happen if I make it, not make it, I don't know. Okay, yeah. So yeah, but still it's a kind of like somebody understanding the vision would be kind of like a much more better for myself to understand why do I supposed to make this thing or not. All right, this is it. I have to be end here, and thank you.